to the goddesses.
Sweet.
Stephanie might be on. Hi, and a warm welcome to the Borealis Show. Today with Johnny Corthius and Jason Rao. We will be kickstarting my series about the warriors among us, because I'm sick and tired of all the bullies and aggressive guys getting all the attention in the media. And I thought, right this morning, it's this time of the year where all the people will pull out their little poppy flowers, and we will be remembered of the soldiers who never came back home to Canada, but fought for our peace and freedom. And for me, a guy doesn't have to go to war in order to be a warrior. For me, a guy is a warrior if he has a kid in the middle of his life and he has to figure out a way around it and make it work. It's a guy who is fighting depression, going through depression, or went through depression but can see the light again. It's a guy who constantly gets obstacles thrown at him but still manages to be a kind heart in our community. Or it's a guy who goes through massive heartbreak and can one day maybe find peace again with women, or however you say that in English.
I think you nailed it.
Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah.
My guest today is Johnny. We met through his sister a couple of years ago, and I thought about him because he has a pretty exciting life out there, and he became a father 2 years ago and is living the dream, I find. He has a wonderful wife, and they travel and work together, and all the pictures and all the stories I hear about them are so inspiring. And when you learned that your girlfriend is pregnant, you must have been really surprised, and it must have been an amazing day.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that it's also causing stress. And how did you deal with that?
Well, okay, so first of all, everything that you listed ahead of time, that doesn't all apply to me. Just as a quick heads up. But
it's not all him.
Yeah, but the most stressful part was when Stephanie called me and didn't tell me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so she called me up and she says hey, I know you're going to be here in a week or two, but when you get here, we have to talk.
Oh no!
I was
you thought, is she gonna break up or what?
Well, I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Oh.
But that kind of suspense is that's simply not acceptable.
Yeah.
So that was the most stressful part. And then when she said that we were gonna have a baby, it was okay, so no one's actually dying then. This is it's actually gonna be just fine. So she thought that I was gonna be really upset, and I think the exact words were you're gonna hate me. But no, that wasn't really a problem. Obviously, a transition period was coming up real quickly. It wasn't really that scary. The suspense for that 4 minutes before trying to actually before actually getting the information out of her that she was pregnant, that was the scariest part.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, once I found out, it was a relief.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Great. And so for me, you are the most free-spirited person I ever met.
Thanks.
Did you have the scare moment that you think, oh my God, I will have to go and have a 9-to-5 job and settle down and be a serious man from now on? Or did you know that you will just take your child and your wife with you and keep doing, not mold them into your life, but make it work so that you can keep doing what you're doing and keep them happy at the same time?
I mean, there's going to be, when you find out something like that, there's pressure, right? For sure, okay, it's not now just about you, and you are going to provide. But at the same time, the pressure to get a 9 to 5 to me sounds like a death sentence. So that there was no inkling of like, I'm like, God, I'm gonna have to just like stop everything that I do that makes me me.
Yeah.
And then just hunker down and be normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there was nothing. There wasn't even a moment to really thought of that. And then that said, it's like, you know, I don't feel like I've really drug anyone along. Like, you know, my wife was already independent and she was already free-spirited, and so was I.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it's like we're just going to do that thing that we're already doing together.
Awesome.
With a little dude.
Yeah. Who
we're going to raise to also be independent and adventure-loving and free-spirited.
And sporty.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So sporty.
Right, yeah, and he is.
Yeah.
So far, he's really sporty.
Oh, I see.
He's all about it. So, I don't know. I think I didn't have a whole lot of like people to look up to or people to consult,
mm-hmm.
like in my life, really.
So who inspired you?
Did my own thing. So when that happened,
yeah.
and when we found out, it was like, okay, I'm going to do my best to figure it out as I go, and maybe I'll look out and, you know, try to emulate some of the elements of people that seem to be navigating it well.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really have anyone to look around at locally to do that, so I went honestly to like podcasts and audiobooks and just
listen
sort
to
of
that guy here.
Yeah, and then also just sort of like followed my own compass, I guess, and tried my best. And I don't know if I'm doing it right, like, to be completely honest with you. Like, I'm trying my best, and
mm-hmm.
it seems to be working.
But that's the only thing we can do, right?
Yeah, and I'm also 2 years into this thing. Like, I'm 2 years into being a dad.
Yeah.
A year and a bit into being a husband. So it's still new,
mm-hmm.
but I love it, and it's like the funnest thing I've ever done.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can tell the listeners, spectators, what you are doing, like what your job looks like, and maybe what you did before. You said you were on a deathbed for at least one time.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that must have changed your life as well. But what do you do today again? Like, I know what for the
yeah. Let's see. That's like the weirdest question, because when people ask me what I do.
Mm-hmm.
For a living, it's like this multifaceted, really long-winded explanation of, essentially, long story short, I've just figured out the things that I really like to do.
Yeah.
And gotten, I guess, good enough at them to teach them,
mm-hmm.
and also do them in exchange for money.
Wonderful.
So to dive in a little bit,
win-win situation.
Yeah. So like to dive in a little bit deeper, like I'm an arborist by trade. And I'm an enthusiast of what are now being called action-adventure sports.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also just sort of like a really curious individual who likes to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I just take my passion for learning and exploring and deconstructing and reconstructing and apply it to the things that I find inspiring and interesting. So what started with martial arts when I was younger, moved into mountain biking, which moved into climbing, which moved into arboriculture, which led to a career in forestry, which led to more mountain sports and climbing, because climbing is climbing, and then that led into exploring mountains and getting up on top of them, and then that inspired me to learn what flight was all about. So then I figured out how to jump out of airplanes, which led to learning how to base jump, which led to just more and more. So I just sort of let my inspirations guide me.
Yeah.
Through life, I guess you could say, and
beautiful.
Along the way, I try my best to find ways to make them sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm out there every single day and I'm making bank doing what I'm doing, but I make enough of a living by just chasing inspiration that I've found that if I just sort of continue that passion, that I can just find something to be inspired about, dive in head first, 24 hours a day, and learn about it, and then follow that sort of template.
Mm-hmm. And your accidents were linked to...
Yeah, so injuries are a natural part of athleticism. Right? Like if you're going to go out there and you're going to be pushing yourself and trying hard things, at some point you're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're serious injuries and sometimes they're near fatal injuries. And I've had my fair share of both of those. And I just learned something new from every one of those situations, and I'm really hoping that I'm done with the life-threatening type of injuries.
Yeah, please. What did you learn?
Oh my
How
God.
did it
So
change?
many things. I mean, one of my very first major injuries was when I was 16 and I broke my neck and I was mountain biking. I was paralyzed for a short period of time, for a couple minutes, due to like a concussion on my spinal cord. And I remember laying there thinking about, wow, if I ever taken this whole like movement and like, you know, ability to just explore areas in like a physical sense, I've just taken so much for granted. So, you know, the lesson that I learned from that injury was to like never take for granted my independence and my freedom. Not even necessarily of just movement, but just of thought. Because when you're paralyzed and you can't move, I mean, panic sets in, but at the same time you realize just how powerless you are. And in the 2 minutes that I was paralyzed, I lived a lifetime of like, you know, projecting what it was going to be like to have someone to help me go to the bathroom and to be wheeled around the block in a wheelchair, or, you know, to never be able to, you know, chase my physical aspirations ever again. So you learn that lesson, and then you go through the healing, and then of course there's the effects that has on you long term. Like I still have permanent nerve damage in parts of my body, which I'll always have, which are convenient because that's like the reminder. Don't take stuff for granted, you know.
Good.
And
you
then,
see it that way?
Yeah. Well, that's how you choose to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, people can say, oh, that thing was the hardest thing that ever happened to me, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And, you know, they're both right. Both of those things are right because that's what you make of it. So when you go through something that's really, really difficult, if you make it the best thing that ever happened to you, then it becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. But if you choose to just play victim, or if you choose to just have that as the hardest thing you've ever gone through, and I hope it never happens again, you choose not to learn anything, you know. But, you know, from breaking my neck to separating my shoulder to having a parachute not open, you know, to even just recently I hurt both of my feet and my knee at the same time and realized that I rely so much on my body, and if I lack, if my life is lacking with things like self-care and training, then, man, like the universe just comes knocking, and now I got to play catch up on that, you know. So it's like you take from these experiences little lessons and you try your best to just apply them and move forward and not forget them. Like, it's so easy. It's so easy to just fall back into the routine and forget what you were supposed to have learned. You know?
1 second. So you guys are watching the Borealis Show, and this is one of my, it is my first warrior from my series Warriors Among Us, Johnny Corthius. And man, so interesting that you managed to make a very horrible, like change or transform a very bad experience into a lesson, and you learned from it and moved on. And you remember we talked just before the show about values that you would pass on to your child, and some stuff that you definitely don't want to pass on to your child that you had to take on from your environment, your parents. Can we talk about that?
For sure. Yeah.
So what is like really important for you to pass on to your son?
Well, let's see. Well, not only to my son, because I don't necessarily think only in terms of my son. Like, you know, I really do want to leave behind, not a legacy, but I guess an example. I just want to try my best to leave an example of like those variables that you're talking about, those certain elements that I'd like to emulate, I guess. You know, a few things that I think I learned from my parents that I actually value would be attention to detail and work ethic. Because my mom, you know, was an absolute perfectionist growing up, which was sometimes super hard to cope with. But I learned from her, you know, I'll never actually forget watching her sign her name, because the entire world shuts down when she signs her name on a piece of paper or when she writes a letter. You could bust out a protractor with her writing, you know what I mean? And it would be to the degree perfect.
Wow.
And although that is evidently OCD, and I totally bug her about it, and it's infuriating in other parts, like as a kid, you can never live up to perfection.
Oh, it's the worst,
which was a point of contention. But at the same time, you know, you can take the best of a situation. So from my mom, I learned attention to detail. And then from my dad, I learned for sure work ethic.
Yeah.
My dad has a tenacity that is like unmatched. I've never seen anything like it. And he'll work 15, 16 hours a day, and every single day that he wakes up, he's got a smile on his face.
I know.
Which is insanity. Yeah, he's nuts. But you can at least take from that the importance to enjoy what you're doing, or choose to enjoy what you're doing, and to approach it with earnestness, you know. But that has a flip side as well. You know, from my father, I learned the importance of balance, because he has none to this day. And although he's working on it, you see holes in people's games. So like in my dad, I see a hole in his game, in that he's dove so deeply into working hard and prioritizing work ethic that other things, I think, have kind of fallen by the wayside. For instance, like self-care. My dad, he's doing a better job now, but he and his well-being has always taken a backseat to providing. And like, it's important to have a balance there, because if you just continue that, at some point you're going to find yourself like broken and unable to provide.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to take care of yourself to take care of others. So, you know, I see that, and I see that in other people as well. It's so easy to just fall into a self-repeating pattern of like provide, more, and then you realize like, oh, well, there's food on the table and there's food in the fridge, but I have no idea like what my wife even enjoys to do.
Yeah.
You know, or like I can't even remember the last time that I sat down and read a book with my kids, or when was the last time that I hung out with my friends. So balance is something that I guess I would have learned from both my parents, because, you know, like my mom, and that attention to detail and that perfectionism, to have that, there's also, you know, impatience that comes along with that, because when you view and when you notice that imperfection in other people, it can negatively affect your mood and the way that you interact with those people. Yeah. Right? So I guess you could say you take what you find valuable, and then you leave behind the rest.
If you're aware of it.
If you're aware of it, right? Which is key. And like I've been really fortunate in my life that I've traveled a lot, and I've met thousands and thousands of people. And what's cool is when you start to get used to that, you start to notice these obvious patterns. Yeah. So you see people that are like successful in one area, but they have holes in their game like crazy in others. Yeah. So you just you take from the value, right, and then you leave behind the rest. And no one person will ever be able to tick every single box. But as you know, as a community, all of those boxes can be ticked, right? Yeah. And you know, with my family, I don't necessarily think I'll ever be able to tick every single box. You know what I mean? Like and I don't know if I aspire to, but I'd much rather be able to tick the ones that I'm effective at and efficient at and can execute really well, and then find other people that might be able to help tick the other boxes. Yeah. You know, for instance, like I believe that I'm a good teacher, and I believe that I can deconstruct and reconstruct things, but that only works for a certain type of mind, and it only works in a certain type of role. So, you know, one of the most simple examples that I use is, you know, if my wife and I are out rock climbing, right, and the climb is really hard, it's not my job to physically push and to be that coach in that situation. It's more for me to just be like a supporter. Yeah. Right? Yeah, and because if I push too hard, then I'm stepping out of my role. Whereas it's very easy for me to just bring along somebody else to rock climb with us, who can be the person that's going to push, right, and to be encouraging and things like that. And I see that, you know, with my son. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be the one to teach him all of the lessons. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I know that somewhere and someone in my life is going to be able to teach him or help me teach him the lessons that he needs to learn, whether or not they come directly from me. And it doesn't matter to me where he gets them from, as long as he gets them. Beautiful. And if you extrapolate that out to, like, what you want to leave behind, why not just let it be that? To, like, have the self-knowledge and the self-awareness to choose what you're going to teach and choose where you're going to lead, but then also just be, I guess, humble enough to allow the people and the situations that are going to be more effective at that do that. You know, rather than trying to do everything.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, that's very nice. They say it takes a village to raise a child, right?
Yeah,
you say that in
and we're all children in some way.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
always.
Like,
So we die.
I'm still like, you know, I'll meet people in the sports that I do or in the profession that I do, and I'll be like, wow, like, what an example they're meeting in terms of X, Y, and Z, whether it's, you know, leadership or forward thinking or financial management or whatever. And sometimes they're older than me and sometimes they're younger than me, but I'm still being raised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm still trying to learn and I'm still trying to grow.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ever stop.
No,
I don't think anyone should. You
No.
Like, when are you done learning?
Never.
Yeah. Like, not until the day you die.
Yeah. So, the time is running so fast with you. I had that one question from my last guest.
Right.
It was about ghosting, and if we could touch on that and dating nowadays, because I find, like, I can see or feel the tension between guys and girls dating.
Are you dating?
Not actively, no.
How come?
I don't know. I'm at that point where I feel I will let it flow towards me and not try and actively go out there and expose myself to that game, because I don't know, it's scary, all that judgment and all that superficial stuff that's going on.
It doesn't have to be like that, though.
I know.
I'm not dating.
I'm a chicken.
I'm not dating, and I haven't been for a long time.
Yeah. But, okay, so...
But I can imagine what it's like. You know, like, I could theorize. I feel like I could probably step into some people's shoes, and I could see why it would be challenging. But people still also need to own their shit.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah.
And, like, if the manipulations and the games and all of that kind of stuff are a problem, then don't take part in those things. But there's millions of people out there. You know what I mean? And you get to choose how you're going to meet those people. And then you also have to consider the source of where you're meeting those people. And if you're meeting people at bars, and you're meeting people on Tinder, and you're meeting people in situations that you're not necessarily proud of, then I can't imagine that you're going to be very proud of the relationship anyway.
No.
And it's not easy to find someone that's going to compliment you, but it's doable, right? And, like, I mean, I've never been on Tinder, and I've never been on a dating app, but I've also had the fortune to, like, travel and meet way too many people.
Yeah.
So I just get exposed to all of these different types of people, and then at some point you end up finding one, and you're just like, wow, I guess we really click. But for me, I guess it was easy to let it flow to me, like what you said. It was easy to just let it occur.
Because you moved around and you were open to it?
And my life lent itself to a high volume of people interactions. Not romantic necessarily, just people.
Yeah.
Right? So then you meet guys and girls that are both in relationships, and you get to see what that pattern looks like. And then you continue to travel, and then you come back around in a year, and you're like, okay, well, things aren't going quite as well as I thought they were, or things are going really good. So then you go out for a beer with that guy or with that girl, and then you talk and you try to figure out, you know, like we were saying before, what are those elements that are actually working? And then you continue to travel, and then you move more, and then you meet people, and then, you know, maybe there's an interaction there, and then you continue to move around, and you continue to travel, and then you actually have time to think and reflect on that, and you're like, oh wow, that was, you know, there's probably no future there, or vice versa, right? So my life allowed for interactions, not with just girls and not with just guys, with couples, with older people, with younger people, and I got to view a lot of different patterns. So for me, when I met Steph, there was a natural progression that was allowed, and at the same time, we were forced to take it relatively slow because we were long distance, and I was traveling all the time, and I was a psycho, you know what I mean? So my situation doesn't lend itself to the norm.
Yeah.
My life never really has, I guess, lent itself to the norm. That all said, if you want to find someone to spend time with, go to the places where you're going to spend time and look around at the people that are there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Get rid of Tinder.
Well, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
And then ghosting is not going to happen, because her question was about ghosting, right?
Okay. So,
like all this, what did we talk about just before that?
That's like when you go out with somebody and then you don't call.
Yeah. And you had an amazing time, but then the guy or the girl, it happens on both decides to never text you back, and why is that? And we talked earlier about the self-image that is so important nowadays, that it's not necessarily authentic, and how that destroys like the romance and dating dynamic.
Yeah,
ghosting.
So that's there's a lot to unpack there, but if you're portraying somebody that you're not, and then somebody is attracted to that person, just know that that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right? Because at some point you're going to want to be you. And if that other person, if that other person has fallen in love with
the image,
or in deep like with the image that you've been portraying, you can't really be upset when you show your true colors and they don't like you. You know, that's kind of your fault.
Yeah,
you
it
know?
is, but some people don't realize it. Yeah.
Right, okay, so and if you don't realize it, then where are you getting your information from, right? And, you know, especially right now, it's so easy to just portray a life that doesn't exist, because you can take an Instagram account or you can take a Facebook account and you can put up the best part of your day, and you can just cherry pick all of the best photos of you and then put them on Instagram and then pretend that you're living this like crazy, amazing life. And we're all relatively guilty of it because we want to show our best sides. But just know that, like, when the time comes to actually sit down and have a conversation with someone, you can't just portray your Facebook or your Instagram profile. Like, you're actually going to have a conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And if you haven't been doing self-work, and you haven't actually read any books, and you haven't actually listened to anybody who's smarter than you, and you haven't gone out and done anything, then you're not going to have a lot to talk about.
No.
So what are you selling? And if you sit down with somebody and you're selling them all these amazing things, and then you realize that you can't sustain it, guess what? You're not going to come again. So you ghost.
No.
So I'm not super familiar with the term ghosting, right? But like the no call is essentially what you're talking about, right?
I think so,
no
yeah.
Call
That's
back,
what
right?
you meant,
Where,
yeah.
you know, somebody thinks that they went out with someone and they both had this amazing time and then they never hear from them again. Well, if the time was that amazing for both of you, you'd be hearing back. So what was it that you portrayed, or what was it that they portrayed, or what was it that you chose not to see in them that are now too afraid to show up again? Like, radical honesty is actually relatively easy to just exercise. Okay? And, like, faking it is lame. It's kind of lame.
Yeah,
right?
completely.
So just don't.
And it costs so much energy.
Yeah.
If you think
Everybody is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, everybody has something to give. So figure out what it is that you have to give, right? And figure out the things that you actually like to do, and just portray those things.
Yeah.
And you're going to find the people that are like that, or that are attracted to that.
Yeah. Oh, and I find it so important what you say. Think about what you can give and not what you want from the other person.
Exactly. But, like, if you put out who you actually are, and somebody's attracted to that, well, done.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, done. Like, the box is ticked. So it's tough. I can imagine how it's tough. And especially now, there's a lot more complicated waters to navigate, I think. You know, you and I spoke briefly about, we don't really get taught how to do this dating thing. We don't really get taught how to do this mating thing either. We're trying to figure it out on our own, and that's probably not really wise. Now, that said, that's sort of a North American thing. I do have friends all over the world, and it's actually not that complicated where they're from. You know what I mean? And I don't know exactly how they approach the topic in other places, but I think that if you just approach it from a place of authenticity, you're probably setting yourself up for a win.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Thank
but
you.
I don't know,
No,
because I'm not dating. So.
Yeah, you're not dating, but I think you're a very good example of being authentic and just, doing your thing and not playing games. And
maybe I'd like to just address something real quick too, because, you know, if you look at my Instagram, you're going to see a lot of photos of me doing crazy stuff, and you're going to see photos of my beautiful family. But, like, I wake up every morning like everyone else does, and I make coffee like everyone else does, and then sometimes I go to work, and it's a slog, and I'm cold when I get in my truck, and then, you know, like life really for me isn't that unique 99% of the time as compared to everybody else's. But that extra 1% of the time where it is unique, I just have figured out ways to step way outside of the norm. And that's what I choose to share. But like I can't imagine that Steph wakes up next to me every day and is like, look at this rock star superhero guy. Because, like, I'm not. I'm just a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I know what you mean.
And I think we need to be super careful the way that we portray ourselves to other people, because if we do decide to portray ourselves as something that we're not, or something that's way bigger than we are, like I had said before, people are going to fall in love or in deep like with aspects of you, or the story that you're selling, right? But you just got to be careful and like early try to represent what you actually are. And that is a conversation that Steph and I had. Like, you know, when we started to hang out quite a bit, I remember she was coming up here and we were staying in like relatively nice hotels, right? This is the classic example that I always use. Well, at that time, like, I was pretty injured, so I wasn't really stoked on like going out and climbing mountains and base jumping and mountain biking and stuff. I was kind of just trying to take care of myself. So staying in like $130 hotel rather than a $60 hotel that was full of roaches and bed bugs was something that was sort of more important at that time. But I just remember vividly saying, like, just so you know, this is not the norm here. This is what's working with like this stage in my life. But like, there's going to be a time where we're going to be like freezing cold and soaking wet, you know. And like, she signed up for that. You know, and then as we progressed through our relationships, there was definitely times where it was glaring that like not everything is in control and not everything goes smoothly every time. Like, she's seen me crash base jumping, she's seen me crash mountain biking, she's seen me make mistakes, you know what I mean? But like, early on, just make sure you represent yourself as a human being and not something more than what you are.
Awesome.
Because they're going to put you on a pedestal. And
and then you don't live up to that, and then you're,
Yeah.
Great. Man, time's up.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
coming.
me.
I have to give you a hug. Beautiful lady. Thanks for coming in, and I hope I see you again soon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that was Johnny Corthius, and now I'm going to throw you guys out.
Okay, see you later.